Welcome, everyone. Welcome to another edition of Remixing Politics and Culture with me, your host, Pam. I am a public relations and marketing professional with a passion for social justice, voter advocacy, and culture. And tonight we're going to revisit this subject matter once again because it is quite troubling and it is definitely on the national news radar. That is, we're revisiting the rogue, bold, and ugly moves that the Republicans and the North Carolina state legislature, under the guise of Hurricane Helene relief for Western North Carolina, what they have done to the state of North Carolina. One thing that I want us all to remember is that all politics are local. All politics are local. So, of course, we can focus on the presidential race. Naturally, we did because there's a lot of money in it and you couldn't escape an ad. But do we really pay attention to our local races when the presidential elections are going on? Do we scrutinize those people that we're to vote for as critically as we do the presidential election, the presidential candidates, I should say? Would you, for instance, want to put anyone in office that would strip the people that you voted for of their rights and privileges of the offices that you elected them to? I know I wouldn't. I would not. I would not want to vote for anyone that had those type of authoritarian tendencies. So let me bring up my guest for tonight, and let's talk more about what is happening here in North Carolina. Okay, so up first, I have Nicole Quick. Nicole is the Government Relations Officer for Carolina Forward, which is a nonpartisan, nonprofit policy organization that communicates progressive ideas, policies, and values to build a stronger North Carolina. Nicole is a community activist and organizer, wife, and mother. She previously served as the chair of the Guilford County Democratic Party. Welcome back to the show, Nicole.
Hi, Pam. I'm happy to be here with you.
All right, great. It's good to have you back. And next up, I have the very newly elected Representative Rodney Pierce. Rodney is an award-winning educator, historian, and writer. He was named the 2019 North Carolina Council for the Social Studies Teacher of the Year Award and a 2022 African American Male Teacher of the Year by North Carolina Central's Marathon Teaching Institute. He is a fellow of the North Carolina Institute of Political Leadership. Pierce recently defeated a 20-year incumbent. He now represents the 27th District of the North Carolina House, covering Halifax, Northampton, and Warren counties. Welcome to the show, Representative Rodney Pierce.
Good evening, Pam. Good evening, Nicole. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely, absolutely. So we're going to have a free-flowing conversation here. And those people that are listening, please feel free to comment and share the video and ask questions and all that good stuff. Okay, so Nicole, I'm going to start our conversation with you.
Okay.
Can you tell us how this whole mess of a Western North Carolina relief power grant bill got started? Who did it?
Whew. Okay, so what happened, I think, Pam, is that we had sore losers, right? So the Republicans in North Carolina suffered some losses this election, and in the wake of that, they decide to try to make power grab, just try to take back some of the power that they lost with some of the major races. For instance, they knew that they lost the governor's race, the lieutenant governor's race that flipped from Republican to a Democrat. They lost the they lost the attorney general's race, and the Department of Construction flipped from a Republican to a Democrat. So they basically looked at that and decided that while they still had a supermajority, they were going to go ahead and push through this legislation that kind of strips some of those powers from those incoming Democrats and put them firmly back in their control in the legislature.
Mm-hmm. Who did it? I mean, because when this whole thing happened, it happened so fast, and all I could think of, okay, my local state senator is Senator Natalie Murdoch, and then Zach Hawkins is my rep, and so I'm all I could think to do, because when I heard it, I was working, and I put something on Facebook real quick to them: stop, don't vote, whatever. I mean, because it was like I couldn't believe it. I was in shock. So,
well, I was going to say, this is the first time we've seen them do something like this. If you remember way back when Governor Pat McCrory lost his bid for re-election, that they did the same thing. They tried to make a power grab then and push through some things, stripping some powers away from the incoming Democrat governor, Governor Cooper at the time, right? So it's a similar thing. And, everybody went back to Raleigh expecting this hurricane relief bill, and it was just blown away. The bill wasn't even released until just shortly before they had to vote on it. The legislators had to vote on it. And it was a 131-page bill. And only 12 pages had anything to do with relief for Western North Carolina. So we were shocked and surprised and outraged. And here we are.
Yeah, here we are. So Representative Pierce, newly minted Representative Pierce, who's just going through your orientation classes and all of those exciting things that I would think you would be thrilled to be going through, since you have beat a 20-year incumbent in your rural counties that you're representing. How does it feel to come into this kind of situation?
Well, it's what I like to call disappointing, but not surprising. These types of maneuvers or these types of activities have been conducted by the majority party or supermajority party, depending on how everything shakes out, because people are still trying to challenge the results of certain races. But excuse me, but again, disappointing but not surprising. And looking forward to just working across the aisle with my future colleagues who belong to that party to try to pass meaningful and transformative legislation for North Carolina and its citizens. And unfortunately, in the midst of doing that good work, things like this pop up in the midst that really don't have anything to do with, truly governing or helping the people of North Carolina. Has mostly to do with what you call, what you said earlier during the intro for this show, which is authoritarianism. And, it's one of those things. I liken it to, being at the playground when you were a kid and you've got one of the balls that everybody's playing with and you don't get picked. So
Uh-huh.
when you do, you take your ball and go home, and nobody gets to play. So that's
But
what it kind of feels like sometimes.
yeah. So listen, Nicole, you've been in this government relations policy role. You've been in politics for a long time. Rodney comes from Representative Pierce comes from a background of education and what have you. How do you really how do you work across the aisle when they have made such blatant moves? I mean, this is worse, far worse than what McCrory and those guys did back several years ago. This is worse, and I've got a little video that I'm going to play on that. Um, I mean, they're really transferring the power of the governor to the newly Republican elected auditor. Since when?
Right. Right. So yeah, so they're doing that. There are a lot of elections law changes. So I know you're passionate about free and fair elections, as am I, Pam. And you know, a lot of elections laws changes. They're transferring control of the Board of Elections to the auditor's office, which will be the only state in the nation who has that under the auditor's control. I mean, some have it under the Department of State, and some have it under the governor, but not the auditor. I mean, that doesn't even make sense. So they're doing that. They're letting the auditor choose the chairs in these county boards of elections. So that flips every county in the state from a Democratic majority to a Republican majority, since the auditor is Republican, right? Previously, they would have been chosen by the governor and they would have been Democrat controlled. Right. So that changes. They're stripping power away from elections for the superintendent of public instruction who's coming in, and they've taken a ton of power away from Jeff Jackson, the incoming AG. He can't even really do anything without getting legislative approval first anymore. So that takes away your checks and balances on the legislature. They specifically said in this bill that he can't do anything that challenges any law put forth. So where is the check on that power?
Right. Where is the check on that power? So Representative Rodney Pierce, you're saying that your goal, obviously, when you ran for this office and felt like, man, I won after, I beat this guy, okay, I'm going to do my thing. I'm going to do my thing for rural North Carolina, because we all know that the rural parts of any state really does not get as much attention as the bigger cities. That's just a fact, right?
Yes.
So now, what are you guys on the Democratic side really strategizing and trying to figure out, a game plan of how to operate now?
Well, we had our organizational meeting on last week. On last week in Raleigh prior to our orientation, and we discussed a few things there. I think the main thing that's my concern in terms of myself coming into the legislature as a freshman legislator, having defeated someone who was known for crossing the aisle and voting to override Governor Cooper's vetoes. I was in a Democratic primary and didn't have a general election opponent. So my opponent was a Democrat, but my opponent was routinely voting with Republicans like he was a Republican. So my concern, the things I've heard and the things that I've been told, my concern is having the opportunity to work with those colleagues who are on the other side of the aisle to bring meaningful resources as well as industry and things of that nature to House District 27, to these 3 Tier 1 counties in northeastern and eastern North Carolina. That is my primary concern on my fiduciary duty. And then when it comes to these things like what we're discussing on tonight, to try to go in there with a voice of reason, saying, what are we really doing here? Because my colleagues on the other side of the aisle, one of the things that I've routinely heard through the years, being a political observer prior to running for public office, is to respect the will of the voters.
Right.
Respect the will of the voters. Okay, the voters spoke in 5 of these council of state races.
Right.
Why are we proceeding to now strip the power from these elected officers and not respect the will of the voters? To me, this is disrespectful to the voters, to the people who elected these people into office. You know, we're the state of split tickets. You know, we'll vote for a Republican president and a Democratic governor.
Yes.
And, you know, you turn around and you strip that Democratic governor of some of his power coming in. Then you have in the state Supreme Court race, you have an opponent who's literally trying to invalidate tens of thousands of ballots simply because they lost.
Yes.
And, you know, I'm saying in my head, okay, so you're going to invalidate the ballots of other people who may be in your party, who may have won their races, or are you going to invalidate the ballots that helped them win their races too, simply because you lost? You know, again, it just comes off as, you know, being back at the playground and saying, I'm going to take my ball and go home. And nobody gets to play if I don't get it, you know, if things don't go my way and if I don't get picked.
Right. Exactly. Have a question in the actual question. What about the courts? Are they compromised too?
Well, the thing about the North Carolina State Supreme Court, prior to the most recent election, not in 2024, but in 2022, I believe that's when the court flipped from a Democratic 4-3 majority to a Republican 5-2 majority.
Right.
So now you have 5 Republican associate justices, well, 4 Republican associate justices, 1 Republican chief justice, and 2 Democratic associate justices, that being Allison Riggs and Anita Earls. Justice Riggs is the one whose opponent is trying to invalidate those 60,000 ballots. So, you know, it's one of those things where, as Nicole was talking about, you know, you want these checks and balances that are embedded into the very fabric of who we are, not just as a state, but as a country.
Right.
And we're literally trying to overthrow, you know, those branches of government that don't agree, in this case, the executive, that don't agree with, you know, the agenda that we have set out. And I believe the founding fathers called that tyranny.
I will
too. Go ahead, Nicole.
I'll jump in there and add to what Representative Pierce was saying. In addition to the state Supreme Court and them now trying to overturn Justice Riggs' reelection, this bill that we've been talking about, Senate Bill 382, a part of that stacks the lower courts. So it actually creates 2 new Superior Court seats that will be and it eliminates 2 seats that are currently held by liberal-leaning judges who have decided against this legislature in the past. So they're trying to stack the courts with their own judges who are friendly to them. So yeah, again, checks and balances just totally don't exist anymore if they're going to fix the game by gerrymandering the legislative districts, stripping powers from the governor, and then stacking the courts, right?
Right. It's insanity. So tell me this. Okay, so you know what? What I'm going to do is I'm going to share this brief video that kind of gives us a quick synopsis of what we've been talking about. And it may help the audience even understand what is going on even more. All right, so I'm going to share my screen. And it's on Instagram. Okay. All right.
We have big news coming out of North Carolina, where the North Carolina Senate has just overwritten Governor Roy Cooper's veto of a bill that will strip power from elected Democrats across the state. Folks, Republicans lost this election in North Carolina, the gubernatorial seat and other seats statewide, and now they try to strip power from those Democrats that are about to take office. The bill at issue will prevent the incoming governor, Josh Stein, from appointing members to the State Board of Elections. It will make the State Highway Patrol an independent agency, requiring Josh Stein to get the General Assembly's approval for an appointment. If a Supreme Court or Court of Appeals vacancy emerges, Josh Stein will now have to fill it based on a recommendation provided by the political party of the departing judge. Essentially, if a Republican justice retires, he can't appoint a Democrat. He will have to appoint a Republican. It prohibits the incoming Attorney General, Jeff Jackson, from participating in lawsuits that undercut actions taken by the General Assembly. It prevents the incoming Lieutenant Governor from chairing committees on energy issues. And folks, there are so much more in that bill, and not enough people are talking about it. Republicans just overrid a veto of the bill in the Senate. It's expected to be overridden in the House as well, and then lawsuits are to follow. But this is the modern day definition of corruption. Comment below your thoughts. Spread the word so more people know what's happening, and follow along for all the news you need to know about.
Okay. So that's it in a nutshell. That's Nicole. What do we do next? What I mean, I know that we've got Bishop Barber. He's starting his Moral Mondays again. And what's next? What do we do?
Well, we still have 3 Republicans from Western North Carolina who voted against this bill because it really did not provide hurricane relief for their districts, right? And
Right.
they need that hurricane relief in Western North Carolina. So they voted against this bill. It's a long shot, but conceivably, if they vote against the veto override, it could fail. Now, I don't foresee that happening. My guess is going to be that they're going to be back in Raleigh this coming week, and there's going to be some sort of hurricane relief negotiated to bring those 3 Republicans back on board with their caucus, and the rest of this bill will pass through, be my suspicion. But there's still a chance. So, reach out to your representatives like you've been doing, Pam, but particularly, reach out to those 3 Republicans. And, I've been trying to share online contact information for those. I'll do that again this evening so that people can give them a call, email them, whatever, to try to get them to uphold this veto by the governor. So we'll see what happens. If that falls through, then the next thing, yes, will be court cases. I know that there are going to be issues with many of the things in the bill. Specifically, one right off the bat that's going to be an issue is there's a provision in the bill that allows the North Carolina schools for the deaf and blind to, not admit students and not allow any sort of questioning of that or appeal from disabled students. So I know that's going to end up in court.
What does that mean exactly? I don't understand.
So that means if you have a student with a disability who is trying to apply to one of the schools, a residential school, and they are somehow a behavioral problem, they can be turned away, and there's no appeal process for that. So, yeah, that breaks some federal laws.
Federal laws. Yeah.
Yeah. So I that one is automatically, I'm sure, going to end up in court. And there are other things that are going to be challenged in court, I'm sure, as well. So that will probably be the next step if this bill passes this coming week.
Representative Pierce, your whole you know what? Let's back up. Tell us, what was your sole purpose for running for office after being an educator for so many years? What was your sole purpose for running?
Well, my sole purpose for running was because I had been observing the voting record of my lame duck representative now for the past several years. And again, we elected him as a Democrat. That's what we sent him to Raleigh to vote as. And his voting record over the past several years, not overall, but he had the highest percentage among all of his Democratic peers in the North Carolina House of voting with Republicans. There was one session, I think it was the 2021-2022 session, where he voted with Republicans more than a couple of members of the actual Republican caucus did. during that session. So the voting record, some of those votes that he cast, one was for the this past budget. This past budget included an expansion of the Opportunity Scholarship or Voucher Program, where public money is used to fund private schools.
Yes.
Also, not only that, that budget also locked in some tax cuts that are going to cut funding for public education as well as early childhood education and child care. And, just being a school teacher at that time, being in the classroom with middle school students, then my own children being in, traditional public schools. It just seemed like it was a slap in the face, not only to educators such as myself, but to those of us who have children in the public school system. Furthermore, some of the boards of education in my house district, as well as some of the superintendents, either adopted resolutions or signed letters saying they were against this expansion of the voucher program, basically saying they were against this version of the budget.
Right.
And, our representative still voted in favor of the budget. So it pissed me off. It made me upset. And I made my mind up that, win or lose, I was going to educate the public about this gentleman's voting record and also challenge him for the seat he'd held for the past couple of decades.
Well, I'm glad you did. And who knows why God helped you win. It was a tight race, I know. And at a very crazy time, because I know that you didn't foresee this happening. None of us did. Nicole, there's a question. Do you think this case will go to the Supreme Court?
There's a possibility, right? We just don't know yet, but there is a possibility that it will end up all the way up at the Supreme Court. That will not be the starting point. The starting point will be a federal court, I would think. But yeah, eventually.
Yeah.
And this is the thing I want to add. There have been cases that have come before the North Carolina Supreme Court that have involved our current Senate leader, Senator Berger, as a defendant, and his son, Berger Jr., is a sitting justice on the state Supreme Court, and he refuses to recuse himself or his colleagues when they vote, because what he has done now is he'll put it to the other justices to decide whether he should recuse himself or not. And if it's 5-2, Republican majority, then those 4 justices are obviously going to vote for him to remain on the case. So to me, that's a conflict of interest.
Right.
One of the things that Justice Riggs' opponent is citing in some of his election protests and challenges is that one of the members of the State Board of Elections, her husband is an attorney for Justice Riggs' legal team. He claims that he's only advised her in pre-election things, not anything post-election. But Justice Riggs' opponent claims that that board member of the State Board of Elections should recuse herself from the proceedings because of that conflict of interest. But he has colleagues on the state Supreme Court who have refused to recuse themselves, such as Justice Berger, as well as other Republican justices on the state Supreme Court who have heard cases or are going to preside over cases where their spouses have financial interest in the companies who will have cases before the court. So if it's good for the goose, let's make it good for the gander.
That's right.
Not just have this recusal when it comes to this Board of Elections members, this Board of Election member, because her husband has a supposed conflict being on that legal team for Justice Riggs. Hold your colleagues to the same standard that you want to hold, this board member to. That would be my
interesting,
because that's
interesting point on that. Go ahead, Rodney. I'm sorry.
No, I was just saying that's one of the things that I believe people, reasonably minded people, have been sitting back observing over the past decade plus, with the North Carolina Republican Party coming into power in the General Assembly, is that some of these things are blatant hypocrisy.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you literally sat there and lost 5 council of state races. And because you lost those races, now you're turning around and you're trying to strip powers from those duly elected officials who haven't even taken their oaths yet.
You sure haven't.
They haven't even taken their oaths yet, and you're trying to strip their power away from them.
Right.
So it's I mean, it reeks of hypocrisy. It reeks of hypocrisy, and not just hypocrisy per se. I won't even use that word. It's irresponsible.
It is irresponsible.
It's irresponsible. It's very irresponsible. It's immoral. You know, it's damn near illegal. You know, it would have to be decided by a court. But that's what we're dealing with now.
Right. Nicole, you had something you wanted to say.
I was going to say the other interesting thing is if, you know, Justice Riggs has won her race even after a hand recount, a second recount was demanded, and now her opponent is challenging, the Republican Party is challenging these 60,000 votes statewide and trying to get those thrown out. Well, the interesting thing about our state constitution is that if her opponent doesn't like the outcome from the State Board of Elections, they get to appeal that decision where? To the state Supreme Court, and the state Supreme Court can call a new election in this race. So talk about a conflict of interest.
Yes.
You know, yeah. So that exists. And same thing with some of these council of state races, the legislature can actually decide to call new elections if they determine that the elections that happened were not free and fair. So it's an absolute travesty what they're trying to do to take power.
It's beyond that. Zachary puts a question in the chat. He says, wasn't it said that North Carolina was a test case for the things Trump wants to do? What do you say to that, right, Representative Pierce? Had you heard that?
No, I have not heard that. I'll say this, though. It would surprise me if that's something that may have been uttered. But I have not heard anything like that. No.
Yeah. Okay. What about you, Nicole?
I have not heard that specifically about Trump, but I have heard that about the National Republican Party and some of the things that have happened here in North Carolina as far as the way that we have had our districts gerrymandered and, you know, control has been secured of the legislature, the way that the courts have been kind of concentrated in conservative hands, and also the way that Republicans have been trying to take over school boards at the local level. I've heard that's part of a bigger strategy nationwide.
Right. I have too. There was one comment I wanted to read. It says, in Michigan, the public showed up at the Capitol wearing duck costumes and quacked. Sometimes shame is the only rational response. At least the public understood the delay in progress required to undo the mess. So what do you think about that? What do you guys think about shaming the Republicans? Or do they have any shame? I don't know. Do they?
I've heard several things about my future colleagues in terms of their feelings when it comes to the people who are opposed to their agenda making themselves known. You know, I was always taught your actions speak louder than your words. You can make your mouth say anything. So I would tell people, you know, let your voices be heard. If you are in disagreement with these actions by the Republican Party that right now controls our state legislature as well as our courts, let your voices be heard. You know, the thing that gets me about this whole thing is I think sometimes we as citizens think that once we voted, we've done our part and that's it. We're good. Right. And I think this is showing you, even when you do your part, things can happen post-election where people are now, if they don't win, and it happened in my race too. When people don't win, they want to protest the actual results of the election and claim that something illegal happened. You know? So this should show people that just because you vote on election day, that doesn't mean that the work is over.
Right.
You still have to advocate. You still have to make those phone calls. You still have to organize. You still have to send those emails, write those letters. You still have to do things like you're doing, Pam, in terms of trying to educate the public and using media, whether it's social media or media of this kind, to educate the public and the populace and let them know what's at stake.
Right.
Because I think, some people don't understand what's at stake. And when you have the income or the wealth inequality that we have in America, sometimes people are so concerned with their day-to-day living, just getting by, working class people, working class families, that they don't have the time to be educated or to understand or know what's going on. So that's why I think social media comes in very, very handily. And you can have videos like the one you showed earlier that can educate someone within a matter of seconds or minutes.
Right. Absolutely. And please, guys, those of you in the chat and those of you who will read this, will listen to this video, watch this video on the replay, please share it. That's the good thing, that you can share information quickly and get educated about things. Because, you on a newscast, it's only 22 minutes. It says it's an hour, but the rest you got to pay the bills with commercials and stuff. So that's what we have to do. That's the questions. Do they have any shame? I think they don't. They don't, Zach.
You saw this past week where they cleared the Senate. So protesters showed up to protest the Senate veto override on this bill, and they had them escorted out, shut off the mics, and had them escorted out. So, I think we still have to make our voices heard the best we can. And they may not listen, but that doesn't mean we should make it easy for them, right? So
I think, and you know what? I just came back yesterday from a day trip in Washington, D.C. My beloved organization, National Association of Black Journalists, the Washington chapter, was having a gala. And one of the speakers who won an award, he said, we cannot be silent. We cannot be silent, and corporate media cannot be complicit by normalizing these behaviors of Trump and what have you. And that has happened. That has happened much too much. And so we all who have platforms or are developing platforms and use social media and what have you, we have to speak up. We have to say something. We do have the power. We still have a constitution. We still have rights. If you just roll over and let them do it and say, oh, we'll get it later, we'll catch it later may not ever come. It may not ever come if we don't stand up and do something right now, and it impacts.
And I think,
go ahead, Nicole.
I think Representative Pierce makes a good point that the general public, they're trying to get by day to day, paycheck to paycheck. They're trying to make sure their kids get a good education, that they have a good job, that they're able to pay their bills, and they're not completely aware of what's going on necessarily in Raleigh or in Washington. And we do need to make them aware. And, one of the things that I wanted to point out this last week is that the first of this month, we had another 7.5% increase statewide in auto insurance rate. Well, people just reelected. People just reelected the Republican insurance commissioner, and he has been raising rates all year long. We're one of the highest in the nation for rate hikes because he keeps giving in to the insurance industry.
And my car is old as dirt right now, but it's old. It's really old. And I was like, why is my insurance this high? I don't even have all of this stuff on it. It makes no sense. And I'm a good driver. Yeah. And I know who this is. This is my cousin who pays close attention to North Carolina politics. And he told me, when are you getting out of there? And he got so mad when he called him the Black Nazi. I can't even think of his real name.
Lieutenant Governor Robinson.
I forgot to say. See, cuz you got me calling him the wrong name. Anyways, I don't, he said, well, why was he up there? I said, he's the lieutenant governor, and he is just through. He is so sick of North Carolina. So he says, that's exactly what I'm saying. What are you going to do to counteract what they're doing? They're doing whatever they want. And as I told my cousin, he means me, earlier this week, we're pushing back with soft voices. He doesn't like that. He's saying no.
Well, we can, as representatives, we can raise awareness, not only on the floor of the legislature during debate on these bills. We can make our constituents aware of what is going on. Those constituents can contact their friends and family or colleagues who live in the districts of some of these bill sponsors to let them know what's going on. I know Nicole was talking about reach out to those 3 representatives in the House of Representatives who are going to be voting on this bill next month. But I have to give credit to Senator Sophia out of Durham. She was like,
Sophia C. I asked her to come on tonight.
Right. She was saying, don't reach out to those people yourself if you're not one of their constituents. If you live in their district and you reach out, then you have a direct hand in their political future. So they're going to listen to you as opposed to listen to somebody who's from the other side of North Carolina, who's a concerned citizen, but they may not pay you the same amount of attention as they pay somebody that they directly represent. So I would say do that as well. And then we have to be careful. And this is where I get back to what I've been told and what I've heard. We've got to be careful what we do in the legislature, in terms of standing up and being vocal about what's going on, what's happening. Because what will happen, as is in the case with me, what I've been hearing about myself going in is that, okay, if you want to be a loudmouth and you want to, speak ill of what we're doing, we can always turn around and redraw your district and make it harder for you to get reelected. We can also refuse to give you any resources come budget time to help out the constituents in your district. So those of us who are in these seats, there's a fine line we have to walk sometimes in being critical of our colleagues, who have their own policy agendas. And I think that's something that I wasn't that aware of going in, but that I've been made more and more aware of since I've been elected. Because when you defeat someone who's been in office for 20 plus years and is known for stepping across the aisle and working with the majority party.
Well, he acted like he was with the majority party.
I'm sorry?
He acted like he was with that party. He didn't act like he was a Democrat.
He didn't vote like he was a Democrat.
Vote like a Democrat.
Right.
Correct.
Right. So that's another side to the game that, people, again, voters don't know. And I would also tell voters, in addition to all those other things, run for office. Run for office. If you feel so compelled, if you're pissed off or angry and upset like I was, run for office. And if you're not going to run, volunteer for a campaign, contribute financially to a campaign. We love to sit on the sidelines and complain. I got tired of doing it, and that's why I jumped in the fray.
And that's why I created this show, because I saw where, as political as I am and my family is, I saw where people, they don't pay attention to the news like I do. I'm in journalism and this whole world, so this is what I do. But I find that people don't listen to understand. A lot of I notice it's a lot of lack of critical thinking. I have this conversation with my girlfriend all the time about the lack of critical thinking about nuances and understanding things beyond the just surface, what people tell you. Trump has been showing you 24/7 who he is. How would you believe that you're the good person that he's not going to deport? I mean, it's just, make it make sense. So it's all of those things, it's just so many things. Yeah. Nicole, you have anything to add you want to say?
I will kind of follow up on what Representative Pierce said. I know some of these representatives, some of the Democrats, have been there for the last 13 years, fighting against this Republican majority. And I know they get frustrated. They feel like they can't do any of the things they want to do or make the change they want to make for their constituents, for their districts. And there are a couple, like his opponent that he needed to win this seat, who have started working with Republicans and kind of caving on some of Democrat values to get some of the breadcrumbs that might be thrown their way. And at that point, I think if you're not willing to fight anymore, if you're willing to just give up to get breadcrumbs, then it's probably time to retire. You don't need to be there, right? So we have to keep fighting. I understand what Representative Pierce is saying about you've got to be able to work with your colleagues and you don't want to be targeted for being critical of them. But there's a difference between that. There's a line between that and just voting with them on every bill they want you to vote on, right? So, got to keep fighting.
And also that just flies in the face of democracy. Democracy is compromise. Democracy is I say my thing, you say your thing. Well, I don't agree with this. I don't agree with this. But what do we agree on? And see if we can meet somewhere in the middle, right? That's democracy. What they're trying to do is very authoritarian, and it is not a democracy. It's anti-democracy. It's anti what I learned in school. It's anti what Representative Pierce taught in his social studies classes. I know, right? So listen, I got a question. Who is this incoming House Speaker in North Carolina, this Representative Destin Hall? I know he's 37. He's too young to be that mean and crazy. And I can tell you something else that bothers me. I see that he graduated from a very good law school and all of that. And it concerns me that you graduate people who become attorneys and then they become policymakers and they do bull crap like this. And it makes me think that, what are they teaching in your law school? I'm being serious. I mean, what are they teaching? I don't know. I think that there's somewhere that there's an ethics class or something, right? I didn't go to law school, but I think
I would think so.
I think there's an ethics class. Okay, we had a statement here. After being gerrymandered and redistricted, the mayor is now running as an independent. This is from the state of Michigan. That's my home state. So I have a lot of people in the audience that are Michiganders as well. Running as an independent for governor, he has given big businesses all the abatement they've asked for, and we must pay. Wake up, people. She's talking about the state of Michigan. And so these problems are everywhere. The one thing that I still say, call Michigan home, obviously I live here in North Carolina forever, is that they got Big Gretchen Whitmer. They got in by a hair with their state legislature, and they started kicking butt and taking names, getting the, protecting Roe and doing all kinds of things. Once they had the power, they made the moves, which I wish we had done on the federal level when we had both we had everything, but we don't seem to. I don't know. Democrats seem to play too nice in the sandbox. You may be right. You may be right. Maybe we shouldn't play nice as do. But I will say one thing. While Representative Pierce has to kind of play nice with his colleagues, you and I can still be out and we can make people aware of what's going on and speak out without worry of retribution. So right. right, because it has to be said. And listen, you can Representative Pierce, you can come on anytime. I feel that you have to, the truth is light. And if it's the truth and people are asking you questions or whatever, you have to communicate that. And but we cannot operate in a spirit of fear, because fear is what is it? They taught us false
False
evidence.
evidence appearing real, or false expectations appearing real.
Right. And we cannot, that's what they want you to do. They
Mm-hmm.
want you to
Mm-hmm.
cower down and just be afraid.
Right.
That's what bullies want you to do.
Of course. Of course.
And that's what I thought that really disarmed Trump with the president of Mexico. She went. She every time he said something, she had something to say, and she told the truth.
Mm-hmm.
Truth
Yes, I agree. I agree. I believe that there is a time and a place to do that. When you're in a seat, like when you're in my position, there's a time and a place for it. I think that it's unproductive if you repeatedly do it over and over again. But as you said, as Nicole said, voters, constituents can make their voices heard, not just at the ballot box, but also through mediums and channels like what you're doing here today. And I think people need to also understand this. A lot of what's happening in our national politics, as well as on the local, state levels, is coming straight out of the 1980s. I can't remember the name of the documentary I watched the other day, but it was very good. It was, I can't remember the name of it, but it was about the moral majority. Jerry Falwell and Paul Weyrich, all those guys.
Yeah, I know.
I can't remember the name of it, but it's a very good documentary. I think it's on.
I saw it. I
think it's on. I think it's on Prime. But this playbook is straight out of the. I'm sorry.
I think it's on Netflix too.
Right. This playbook is straight out of the 80s, and I think people need to understand, those who think that their votes don't matter, or that me casting my vote is not going to change anything. Paul Weyrich literally said in the 80s that, our chances to win go up when people don't vote. Mm-hmm. So we have to show up. We have to financially contribute to those people who are running. We have to, start our own candidacies for offices. And it doesn't have to be at the state level, like what I did prior to this. In 2022, I ran for school board.
Okay.
Back here in my county, and I lost that race.
Okay.
I didn't know God had this destined for me.
Right. You went so much higher from the
exactly. So that's what I would encourage people to do. Hold us accountable as your candidates and as your legislators. Let us know where we might be messing up, or bring things to our attention that you want us to advocate for and bring light to, or bring awareness to, that those of us in Raleigh or in DC may not be aware of. I think citizens need to understand that they have to do their part too, in terms of holding people accountable, whether they're Democrats or Republicans. If they're not voting the way they should be voting, or something that is something that you want to see,
right?
Then there's always an alternative. You can vote for their opponent, or you can run against them yourself.
Right. Nicole, so this whole mess will end up in the courts. So that means in the meantime, to fight this in the courts, that means that Governor Stein's his great celebration of being my governor. I've had the opportunity to meet him a few times and took a picture with him when we were doing Souls to the Polls, the last one for the general election. And I always would tell him, you're going to be the governor. I've been telling him that forever, because I've really loved him as the attorney general. So it looks like that everybody's going to be hobbled a bit. He's going to be hobbled because he can't really do what he needs to do, because there's always going to be a fight.
That is my concern. That is my concern. I'm hoping that something will happen with the courts to turn that around. But that is the goal of the legislation, and until we can stop it, it looks like he will be hobbled. He won't have the power that he would have had. And you talked about everything he did as Attorney General, and
Yes.
he has been an amazing Attorney General. I mean, fighting for
Yes.
opioid money, fighting,
Yes.
you know, just he's been amazing. And to think that Jeff Jackson's not going to have that same opportunity, right? Because that power has been taken away.
And see, the thing is, we know now there are more scams and things than ever, because I would always pay attention to my emails that the governor's well, he's our governor elect now, but the attorney general's office sends out, because they're so pertinent about the various scams, phishing scams, and what have you. And then now there's this new one on text messaging, and I mean, it's just always something. There's a lot
we need
of
somebody to fight for us, right?
Right. And he always did. And I have a position in a government agency in communications. So I would then make sure I spread that information on that level too, which was even larger than my own personal. But it's just, it's ridiculous. You have to have these powers. And this authoritarianism, we're seeing it globally, really, that this rise in that it's like a spirit or something, for lack of a better word, from a religious standpoint. It's like, it's really bizarre, but we will see how it happens. But I just don't think that we can afford to sit idly by, as my cousin said, use soft voices and do nothing.
Well, I think something that they need to be reminded of, and a friend of mine mentioned this to me just yesterday, is they're not always going to hold those offices, right? So
Right.
Are they considering that when they change the law, when they take the power away from those offices, that, that's going to hurt them too eventually, because when they get elected to it, then they're not going to have the ability to do anything. So it always comes back around.
I think that's the point, though. By definition and by design, the North Carolina legislative branch, the legislature, is the strongest branch of our government, because they literally make the laws that govern the other parts of the government. It's just like years ago when we used to have nonpartisan judicial races, and then they changed it where they became partisan.
Yeah.
So now whether a person's a Republican, whether they're a Democrat, what they lean. So I think that's part of the point. They want everything. They want the majority of the power vested in the legislative branch, because as long as they control the legislative branch through these gerrymandered districts, then they control the power, whether that's the stripping powers away from members of the executive branch, or removing judges, the seats for judges who rule against them. That's just the playbook right now.
Yeah. I hope, Zachary, that you're wrong about America about to cross a bridge of no return. We're going to be a permanent kakistocracy, and a government by the least suitable. That it's frightening to me. I can't even imagine. Yeah, so sorry, guys, but it's happening to you guys in real time with Project 2025. There will be no more election wins by the majority. It'll be whatever they want. So we need to find out another option. I don't know what the other option is, other than I'm going to do a show on people that are leaving the country, that are seriously talking about, going to live someplace else.
I refuse to give up, Pam. I'm not going to give up on our state or our country. I'm going to keep fighting.
I have a cousin, and that cousin that's his sister, that she is a Desert Storm veteran, and she is living in Mexico now. Now, of course, if they ends up being a tit for tat between Mexico and the U.S. because of Trump. They might she's threatened the governor, not governor, the president of Mexico. She said, "I'll send your people back." So who knows?
It's crazy.
It is crazy. Latrice is with you, Nicole. I'm staying right where I am. Latrice is in New York. She's a diehard New Yorker.
The documentary is called Bad Faith.
That's it.
Bad Faith.
That is guys, that is a powerful documentary. Bad Faith. It is on Netflix for sure, and I think it's on Prime. But it is really good. It is excellent. In fact, I said I was going to watch it again. It is that good. I promise you. And it's so well done, don't you think, Brett Pierce? It is
definitely
so well done. Yeah.
It's very educational. I think it's about an hour and a half, hour and 45 minutes. And it basically explains how the religious right became a political player. How Christianity was politicized into what we see today, which is kind of like this Christian ethno-nationalism, that if you're not a Christian, then somehow you're not patriotic.
Right. But this is Christian nationalism. This is not Christianity in its
not at all
sense.
And I mean, and it's anti what the founders stood for, because even though James Madison was enslaved other human beings, he is the man who wrote the Bill of Rights. You're supposed to have freedom of religion. If I want to be an atheist in America, I can be an atheist. The government cannot interfere. So it's anti what the actual founders stood for. But again, that goes back to education.
Right.
And people understanding, the foundations and the roots of America. Right.
Yeah, that's right. You're absolutely right. Absolutely right. And I have we have a gentleman here who's the senior pastor of St. Joseph AME Church. I have had him on the show, Dr. J. Augustine, and he has expertise in Christian nationalism. He's written a couple of books on it right here in North Carolina. And he does a lot of social justice initiatives here in Durham. So, but anyways, well, listen, I have enjoyed talking to you all. I think our main focus now, for those of us who live in North Carolina, and even if you don't, help us raise the roof and make noise about what's happening here, because being quiet is not going to work. And I admire the South Korean people. They are not tolerating what's going on in their country. They are speaking up and speaking out, and they are not being silent about it at all. So we can't.
Absolutely.
Yeah, we cannot.
That was impressive, wasn't it? That was impressive to see.
And one young lady even says she was dogging us in America, talking about we're not doing what y'all doing. You got a felon. Oh my God, it was so embarrassing. Okay, I don't know what that meant. Isn't it white? Yeah.
I think one of the things that keeps me encouraged is that I think back to the writing of James Baldwin, and one of his lines was, one of the things that he said one time was, I have to be an optimist because I'm alive. So I think we can't allow ourselves to, kind of like what Nicole was saying earlier, we can't allow ourselves to become discouraged or to dwell in pessimism. We have to stay positive. We have to think optimistically, despite the reality of what we're dealing with at the time. We have to, I don't think we get to where we are as a country, as just as U.S. citizens, and then specific groups of people, those historically excluded and marginalized groups of people who had to advocate and fight for their rights to be recognized as human beings in a lot of cases, and as citizens. They had to keep that mindset of continuing to press forward.
That's right.
That's the mindset that we have to have.
That's right. That's right. And we have to do that. So in doing that, guys, share this video. Share the video. And let's keep one another encouraged and lifted up, and enjoy this holiday season, because we have a lot to be thankful for in spite of, and we're just gonna we'll rest and we'll re-strengthen ourselves to raise our voices to have them heard, and to do something about it, because I really believe if we push back, you see that with some of the Trump's picks, with that constant negative attention to things they have to back down. It's the will of the people. We are the people. We the people.
That's right.
Right. All right. So let's say good night. We're gonna sign off, and guys, stay tuned. Please share this show and like it and share it and subscribe to the YouTube channel. Thank you. Good night, everyone.
Thank you. Good night.
Good night.
Thanks, fam.